First hour will be devoted to, first of all, a presentation by the Department of Emergency Services and Public Protection, which we hope will take about 20 minutes or so, because then we need to have time for a presentation by the Connecticut Police Chiefs Association, and also allow time within that hour for questions from members of the committee. And then the second hour, the next hour, will be a presentation and questions for Connecticut manufacturers. And then the next hour after that, presentation by the Connecticut Conference of Municipalities and dialogue with the committee as well. So if the members of the Department of Emergency Services and Public Protection were planning to testify, come forward. Yes, if you'd welcome Steve or Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's come to my attention that the majority of this hour that I thought we had reserved for members of the task force to ask questions and glean information is somehow going to be absorbed by what some legislators have talked about as being Guns 101. And so I'd like to go on the record, while I think this is important. I have no idea how many of the 16 of us, 17 of us, 18 of us will feel that their questions have been adequately answered, or whether this will provide sufficient time to answer those questions. So I'd like to go on the record now and try and get an answer from you, Mr. Chairman, as to when the next public hearing or informational hearing will be held, so that we can be sure that we have as much information as we can before we make a decision.
As you know, our understanding is that the first hour is to be devoted to both questions, both presentations and questions and answers. So, so I would think that a 20-minute initial presentation followed by questions would suit the purposes of this hearing. Obviously, members of the committee, as members of the General Assembly in general, are able to make arrangements to either visit the state police or their local police to get some more information about the actual weapons that may be discussed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Unfortunately, I'm not sure that that leaves, I think you've laid out 20 minutes for these folks and then something for the Police Chiefs Association. I can tell you that just based on the testimony that I already heard and the courage that I think it took for those folks to get here, I can tell you that I have a question based on what I heard, which was, are machine guns banned in the state of Connecticut? Well, with all due respect, this is going to go a lot easier if the public doesn't answer the question and the people that are in law enforcement, because this is their segment, they answer that question. And I don't know who made the decision to have this presentation put on now, without calling me as a co-chair, but I'll tell you right now that I think this is offensive. And so I'm willing to proceed, but I'm willing to proceed with an understanding there are 3 leaders in this room right now, that there will be an opportunity for members of this task force to have these folks back here and ask them questions prior to us moving forward with any recommendation. And I'm willing to stay here as late as anyone wants to stay. I'll have breakfast here tomorrow.
Well, thank you. Let's. Why don't we begin with the presentation, and again within the time constraints available, because a key thing for all of us here is to have dialogue with the presenters as well as listen to the presentation. So,
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
I don't believe you've answered my question.
I have no objection to doing that. This is.
So there'll be another opportunity between now and the time we make our first recommendation as a task force for the Department of Public Safety, DEPS, whatever the new acronym is, to come back, and if we believe that there was insufficient time here now, we will have an opportunity as a task force to ask those questions prior to there being a decision made by this task force. Is that
a question of first impression without an opportunity to discuss in advance, but I will say I certainly have no objection to doing that.
Thank you. Then I'm ready to proceed.
Thank you. You identify yourself, please, Mr. Spellman, and then proceed. Right.
Good morning, Chairman Minor, Chairman Looney, President Pro Tem Williams, and members of the committee. I am Attorney Stephen Spellman. I serve as Chief of Staff for Commissioner Reuben Bradford of the Department of Emergency Services and Public Protection. We have a presentation this morning that is in two parts. You've heard Representative Minor refer to the first part as Guns 101. Our intention this morning is to attempt to provide useful information to you. Essentially, the first part of this will try to present an understanding of what different firearms are and what correct terminology is. The second part of the presentation will be a PowerPoint presentation that is designed to give you an understanding of what current law is. In particular, what our Special Licensing and Firearms Unit does in carrying out Connecticut's laws in regard to licensing, background checks in the NICS system, approval of sales and revocation of weapons. I can say that the agency stands willing to provide whatever information at whatever time this committee requires in order to help you to carry out the very important task that you have. With that, I should make one point that I want to make also as to what this is and what it is not in regard to this presentation. Our intention this morning is to give you information as to firearms and terminology and current status of the law. We are not here this morning to make recommendations to you as to what should or should not be done in regard to changes in the law. We do believe that the information that we will provide will give you a solid foundation upon which you can begin to make those determinations yourself. And as I said earlier, we'll be glad to respond whenever and wherever in terms of information that you need. With that, I'm going to turn it over at this point in time to Trooper First Class Joseph Delahanty, who will sit here and give the presentation as to the firearms.
Good morning. I just wanted to go over some of the different firearms, so in case you hear terminology, as far as action goes, is how the firearm actually works. We have a bolt action right here in front. Bolt action means that you actually have to work the bolt in order to get around from the magazine into the chamber. Then we go over here to a pump action. You actually have to work the action with a pump. They call that the trombone, but it is a pump action. A lever action. You actually pull the lever down, which extracts a round from the magazine inside. And when you pull the lever back up again, it'll put the round into the chamber. This was actually the design that John Browning used to come up with his automatic submachine gun. He was able to use a bunch of levers and springs. It was actually used to work the lever by utilizing gases as it comes out of the muzzle. That brings us up to semi-automatic firearms that use gas in order to work the action. So we have an AK Type 47 firearm here. That one, it doesn't lock open. So then we have from that, we go to the AR-15, which is the American rifle. This one is currently banned. If you look at that, it has a bayonet lug. It has a flash suppressor. It does have a detachable magazine. It has a folding or telescopic stock, and it has the pistol grip. So all of those together are actually in Connecticut. If you have a detachable magazine and two of those other functions, it calls it an assault rifle for Connecticut. This one next to it is the Bushmaster, which is currently legal. If you look, it has no flash suppressor. It has no bayonet lug. The pistol grip is there. It does have a detachable magazine, but it does not have a folding stock or a telescoping stock. And then because our law does discuss grenade launchers on firearms, I brought one that this is a firearm from the military with a grenade launcher on it. As far as firearms go, when they talk about detachable magazines generally go from the bottom up. Clip-fed or stripper clips generally go from the top down. So we have the M1 Garand here. This works on an N-block magazine, which the magazine or the N-block clip, which is
Please. No comments from members of the public during the presentation.
okay. That one, the N-block clip loads from the top down. The SKS, which is over here on the left, that loads from a stripper clip from the top down. But magazines generally encompass the entire bullet, and those generally load from the top or from the bottom up. So like I said, we just wanted to go over some of the different firearms. As far as pistols or handguns go, we have a revolver. It's considered a revolver because the cylinder actually revolves when you pull the trigger. There are a number of different models: single action, double action only, double, single revolvers. Then we go to semi-automatic pistols. Those work when we talk about, somebody discussed automatic before. Each pull of the trigger, it loads another round into it, but we know now full auto means when you pull the trigger, the rounds continually to come out until you either run out of ammunition or you stop pulling the trigger. So those are semi-automatic pistols. If there are any questions, like I said, this is a really quick.
Questions, members of the committee at this point? Representative Minor, do you have any?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I actually had a couple of questions. First off, I noticed that the handguns that were held up a moment have longer clips. Excuse me, magazines. Sorry about that. How many do those hold?
The one on the government model, or the silver one, that's an 11-round magazine, and the other one in the Glock is a 30-round magazine. When I was on the tactical team years ago, we had extended magazines to give us the capability of more rounds carried. We don't basically use those anymore, but
And
we
what
did have that
would be a
capability.
standard magazine for each of those? Just
I believe the government model, you could get it was designed around a 7-round magazine. You can get 8s that are very comparable, and they don't extend out below. The Glock is normally, depending on what model, they could go up to 17, but right now in Connecticut, it's minimum of 10. But they were designed depending on the size, anywhere from 8 to 10 to 17.
And one final question. On the semi-automatic rifle in the front, it was one of the, I think that's a AR-15 with
Correct.
a bayonet on it.
Correct.
Is that the standard position for a bayonet lug? Is that, or because we talk a lot about bayonet lugs in our law, that I see you've attached a bayonet to it.
Yes, that bayonet, the bayonet is for a different rifle. I mean, the bayonet is for an AR-15, but it's for the rifle. This is the carbine version. I just wanted to throw it on there to show that that is part of the law, not having a bayonet lug. Normally, the ring around that's at the barrel would encompass the flash suppressor to give it a little more stability.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you very much for your answer. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Walker?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Could you, on the AR-47, the AR-15, and the Bushmaster, all three of them are legal in the state of Connecticut?
The Bushmaster is currently legal.
The
because,
Bushmaster.
again, I said the law is written around the detachable magazine. If it has two other things, like a flash suppressor and a bayonet lug, that would make it an assault rifle. This one does not have the flash suppressor, it doesn't have a bayonet lug, and it doesn't have a telescoping stock. So the only thing it has is a detachable magazine and a pistol grip. So that would make it legal in Connecticut. The AK-47, in order to get away from that pistol grip, they put on what they call a thumb hole stock. So that is not a pistol grip now, it's a thumb hole stock. There is no flash suppressor, and there is no bayonet lug on that.
And it was mentioned before that a machine gun is illegal in the state of Connecticut. Is there the definition of a machine gun versus an automatic rifle?
Well, they're basically used interchangeable. A machine gun is a full automatic, or one that can be put on full automatic, or a 3-round burst. These are semi-automatic, so these would be under a different heading.
So the difference is the semi versus the full automatic.
Correct. A machine gun would be full auto. The assault rifle law does say that it would be a machine gun, so that covers machine guns and those that are semi-auto.
How many bullets can an automatic release versus a semi-automatic? Is it the same?
No, absolutely not. A full automatic would probably, well, when you pull the trigger, they just keep coming out. So that you could have 100 rounds or 800 rounds in a minute.
And a semi-automatic?
Semi-automatic, you have to pull the trigger every time, so it's as fast as you can pull the trigger.
Okay.
So that's going to cut that down probably by 75%.
Thank you, sir.
Representative Dargan?
Good morning. Good seeing you again. Can you just take a moment to explain the difference with magazines compared to long guns and short guns from a 10 to 30 magazines, and also with some of the long guns that you could actually have more than 30 magazines if you want to in some instances, but some of those long guns that there might be a problem with a larger magazine that it might actually not fire?
Well, yeah, when everybody wanted to have more magazine capacity for whatever, these guns, for our use, we keep them for our AR-15s, we keep them at the 20-round magazine because that's what the rifle was designed around. We allow 30-round magazines because the military's tested those and it works. But when you start getting into 90 and 100-round magazines, we found that they just don't work for us. We need reliability. So we keep our magazine capacity to 20 and or 30. As far as some of the other guns, I mean, they can get 100-round magazines that look like the old drum magazine from a Thompson submachine gun. But again, they're very not that reliable.
Thank you, Representative. Senator Whitcoast?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And maybe just for a point of clarification for all the committee members, if you could just point out what a flash suppressor looks like, the telescoping stock, and what its purpose is functioning on the guns.
Okay, a telescoping stock makes it smaller. The law also talks about folding stocks, whether it folds to the side or folds underneath, but this would be a telescoping stock. The pistol grip, the detachable magazine would go in here. This is the flash suppressor. What happens is that as the round is fired, the gases come up through these holes at the top, and it dissipates the flash, so that if you're in the woods or on the other side of a field or something and you're shooting, you don't give away your position. And then the bayonet lug is underneath. It just locks the bayonet to that lug.
Thank you. So to clarify, in the law it says that if we have three, any of those three options, then it goes under the assault weapon.
It's considered an assault rifle, yes.
Thank
So
you.
it has to have a detachable magazine and one of the other, or two of the other three.
Thank you, Senator. Senator France.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. I appreciate that. Thank you for the presentation. I have a simple question about performance. Assuming a gun is used for hunting purposes, if you go from 2 vertical hand grips to 2 horizontal hand grips, or a combination of a horizontal and a vertical, is there any loss in performance in terms of accuracy?
No.
So it doesn't make any difference whether you have vertical or horizontal grips?
No, I was a sniper on the SWAT team for 18 years, and we didn't have any of that. And my rifle was very accurate.
Thank you.
Thanks, Senator. Co-Chair Minor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You may have heard earlier that machine guns are banned here in the state of Connecticut. Would you care to comment about whether they are, in fact, banned or whether they are allowed to be lawfully owned in the state of Connecticut?
I think I'll allow my partner to work on that one.
Even if you have them properly...
Would you please, excuse me.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Representative Minor, I do know that that's a specific slide in the PowerPoint presentation on machine guns, so that will be addressed if you want to wait, or we're glad to answer it now.
Well, I'm a little fearful that there may not be time for questions after you get done with your PowerPoint presentation, so.
Machine guns are illegal by state statute if you haven't done it in the proper channel. The first channel you have to do is go through ATF, the Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms. You have to go through the procedure and get approved and get a tax stamp from the feds. Once you get that tax stamp from the feds, then you have to immediately register that gun with us. So there are people in Connecticut who do have lawfully possessed machine guns, and there are people in Connecticut who don't lawfully possess the machine guns. So you have to have the tax stamp and the registration from the state police.
So the public is clear, whatever legislative statutory action we've taken, they do exist lawfully in the state of Connecticut.
Correct.
And what I think many people have said to me, I'll tell you they've said to me, is didn't we go through this exercise once already with assault weapons? And so I think you have two, what I call a current generation and a prior generation. At the time the legislature took that subject up, did we make it unlawful in the state of Connecticut to own the earlier generation?
Are you talking about machine guns or assault weapons?
Assault weapon.
Our assault weapon ban went into effect shortly before the federal ban went into effect. But in our statute allows for pre-ban weapons. We have no authority over the pre-ban weapons. There are an allotted, say, 20-ish firearms that are banned on their face, and then we get into the configuration side of the assault weapon. But the pre-banned firearms that are not the guns that are banned on their face by statute are not prohibited.
And so again, just to clarify for people, when we use the word banned, we don't really mean banned. We mean that we have, in the process of reaching a legislative understanding, allowed people who have lawfully owned these guns to register them with the state of Connecticut and maintain ownership of those guns. Is that correct?
There are people who lawfully possess assault weapons in the state, and they were issued certificates of possession back around the 93, 94, 95 time period when the assault weapon ban went into effect. Yes, so there are people who own lawful assault weapons in the state of Connecticut, yes.
And if I could, does the Department of Public Safety, and I apologize for not, getting to the next generation there, is there a separate categorization of those guns, both machine gun and those that would have included under the heading of some earlier ban? Does the agency know where those are?
We know where all the lawful assault weapon and machine guns are, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Are there other questions from members at this time?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just as a follow-up to that, the gentleman indicated when he was here earlier that we have a lot of legislation currently on the books, and I think there's an expectation that when we go through this next round, that somehow we'll fix something. And my question, I guess, is, assuming that we were to pass legislation to ban the possession, manufacture, whatever, of this next generation, could you take me through the process of how the department plans to let people know, or let those that are advocating for that there is some process by which the state will ensure that in fact will be carried out?
I think that question, with all due respect, Representative Minor, goes, to the area that we did not want to get into in terms of prospective speculation about how we would enforce some new law. It's a difficult area because, not the least of which because we're one state, and you have different laws in other states, and basically, we will enforce to the best of our ability any new laws that you pass, and within available resources, we'll try to make the public aware of exactly what changes are in effect.
understanding that there may be another opportunity, I guess, for us to maybe delve into some of these questions a little bit further, if I could ask you folks to think about my question and help me understand the benefit of developing another list. When I was an EMT, an MRT, and we brought people to Charlotte Hungerford Hospital, the assumption was that the paperwork we filled out was being looked at by someone, and I think we found out that that might not always be the case. Certainly they looked at it at the hospital, but whatever people thought they were going to glean from that record may not always have been the case. I think that people who have reached out to me over the last 3 or 4 weeks fully expect that when we develop a new list of banned whatever, that someone's going to, at some point in time, someone's going to be able to say, we've done the best we can to meet what you intended. I'd like to think that it's not going to be bound up in some legislative jargon like within available appropriations, because you can't help but think that we all lost something on the 14th, certainly not to the degree that the people who were here that testified this morning. But if I've heard anything from the parents, they want us to do something meaningful. And I want to do something meaningful. But to add one more list, one more description, one more whatever, and find out that we haven't gotten anywhere, I'm not sure that's going to be helpful. And it just seems to me that the agency must know what the logical evolution of our legislative process would have to be should we put that in place to make a difference. So I would ask you to go back and think about that. Maybe we can revisit that question again before we reach a decision. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Minor and Senator Looney will move on to the PowerPoint at this point, if that's acceptable.
We have a couple of more questions. Then I believe we may actually have some additional family members here of those who died at Sandy Hook School. But before moving to that, there's a question from Senator Hartley, and I believe a follow-up question from Representative Carter.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Recognizing that the state of Connecticut has distinguished itself over the years with regard to legislation in this area, and that there is a definitive and some might say in-depth body of law on guns in the state of Connecticut, we recognize that and no legislation is perfect, but that legislation that exists right now may in fact have loopholes. And we've had preliminary conversations with the department with regard to your assessment of perhaps existing law which does have, for lack of a better word, loopholes. And I am, one, asking if in fact that is the department's position, and two, is there work with regard and recommendations with regard to such a situation, if in fact you do agree with that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator Hartley, there is like one significant loophole that we have identified that I'll let Detective Maxson address.
Thank you.
I think, Senator Hartley, you're speaking in regards to the secondary sales of long guns, which do not require that a background check is completed on that person purchasing that long gun. That would be the biggest area that we have in Connecticut where we don't do a background on a party receiving a firearm. When all handgun transfers, whether at retail or secondary, have to have a background check done through our office, there are forms that they legally have to complete, and they have to get that authorization number or that NICS number, which is the FBI, National Instant Criminal Background Check, okay, which checks many federal databases for mental health and criminal convictions in other states. So we do a background on all individuals purchasing handguns at retail or secondary secondary sales. Long guns at retail also have these background checks, these NICS checks. But the secondary sales of long guns between two private parties, they do not have to do a background check if they choose not to. So I think that is what you're referencing when you talk about a possible loophole regarding the transfer of a long gun.
And so that would perhaps be the most glaring one. I guess my question is, and we'll be trying to refine this as we go along, if there are other such amendments and refinements, then I'm sure we'll be getting those recommendations from the department.
That is correct, Senator.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator. Representative Carter?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess we'll go back to Guns 101 for just a moment. It recently came to my attention that there were some guns on the market that had a folding barrel, Kel-Tec being the one that somebody had told me about. Has that ever been discussed, or, I mean, are there a lot of guns on the market that are like that, or is that perhaps the only one?
Not really, no.
Okay.
I mean, they had some survival guns that were able to fold up smaller to go in backpacks and airplanes and things, but...
I was told this was designed for law enforcement and used the same magazine as what the officer would have in their pistol.
They would like it to be so.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Yes. Yes, Representative Fox.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Very, very quickly, I just wanted to follow up on the loophole that you described with respect to Senator Hartley's question. Is the Bushmaster considered a long gun?
That Bushmaster, yes.
So that can be sold without a background check privately?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Just one. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Okay. At this point, we do have some an additional presentation to be made by other family members from Sandy Hook who have joined